Hello and welcome back to the Oh No 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 podcast, where today we're going to be looking back as Raith Rovers made a thrilling visit to Firhill. Very much a game of two halves yesterday. I'm your host today, Robbie Weir, and I'm delighted to be joined by firstly Blair Hopcroft. How you doing, Blair?
Very well, mate. Game of two halves, but it was the right way around this time for a change, which was lovely.
Exactly. Very, very nice to see, being the boot was on the other foot. Also joined by Scott Fleming. How are you getting on, Scott?
Yeah, not too bad. As Blair says, it was the right way round this time, and I mean that's back-to-back games that we've actually played well in the second half. So long may it continue.
Yeah, and last but no means least, we've got planes, trains, and automobiles. It's Leslie Maben there. How you doing, Les?
Fantastic. Out the house for 13 hours yesterday to get to Firhill from Oban via a train and then a shuttle bus and then the underground and a bit of walking. But very happy to be here on Remembrance Sunday. For those of you who are listening rather than watching, you will not see myself and Blair have come with a bit of a wardrobe malfunction. We've both got our McRae's Battalion tops on today. Memory and respect to those who have fallen.
Indeed.
Yeah, I noticed Rovers put out the tweet about the McRae's Battalion at 11 o'clock, which obviously a nice touch there. And of course, you've got your Fanky Dabo. I'm going to guess that's a Coventry kit up in the background there. Is it?
It is a Fanky Dabo Coventry kit from the past. It's quite small, it's a junior size, but it didn't cost me an awful lot. And a goal I've set myself is to get it signed during the time when he's here. So if we can extend his deal a bit and give me a bit more time to do that, that would be magnificent. If anybody from the board is listening.
If ever there was a reason for extending a contract, aside from having a really excellent football player on your books, it would be that. So yeah, just looking back to yesterday, pre-match lineup, the 3-5-2 stayed in place. There was only the one change. Sean Byrne came in to replace Sam Stanton, who had taken a bit of a knock in training. Scott, what were your thoughts on that? I know that we'd spoken a bit at length on the pre-match podcast about how 3-5-2 might be a bit more difficult without Sam Stanton, given his sort of energy levels and the running that he does. Was that a bit of a concern for you initially when you saw that come through?
I don't think it was really a surprise because I think we all pretty much said that we expected the same sort of formation to come out. More of the fact because it worked so well the week before and we'd played so well. So I think I wasn't too surprised with that. Obviously, Hamilton came in as well for Smith, who had started the week before. And I think on paper, you would think that should work better than Smith and Jameson, just the sort of little and large sort of combination. And Hamilton able to sort of knock the ball down to Jameson, and Jameson's able to then probably use his legs more and try and stretch the defence of Partick. But other than that, I was quite happy with the team. I think within 5 minutes, obviously the goal came in 6 minutes, but I think we noticed that it wasn't really working very early on, and pretty much I think we were all saying in the group chat that by half time we've got to change back to a back four and maybe make some personnel changes to make that work, because it just, for some reason, it just wasn't clicking. And whether it's because of how Partick play or it just wasn't our day with that formation, I don't know. But it's very much came to the point where that formation seems to be, it has to be only on occasions and it can't be every week or anything like that. And it seems to be also, it can only be when Bruni and Stanton are fit. If you've not got the two of them, I wouldn't bother with the back three. And yeah, I think also we'll go on to speak more about it. But Fordyce, I thought it was probably one of his poorest games in a Rovers jersey so far.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in a little bit. Blair, what are your thoughts about that, keeping the same team, the formation, given the performance against Erin? Do you think that's a fair assessment to make, that we sort of just need to judge it by who we're playing against in the situation?
I do. I disagree with Scott in the sense that it only works with Stanton. I think it works better with Stanton. I'm not convinced it only works with him, but I totally get the point. It didn't work particularly well, but I actually think that was more to do with Partick and the way that Partick played than it was with us, and the difference between them and Ayr and the kind of joy that we were getting. And I think that actually for me played into Fordyce's performance as well. I kind of feel for the manager slightly. You can't win a game the way that you win a game against Ayr change to a back four and then have that first half performance. So had they performed the same way as they did with the back five with a back four, you suddenly get, what did you change it for? Everything was working great. It was absolutely brilliant. Why did you change it? He's kind of forced into the formation in the sense that they, like Scott said, they were so good last Friday. You can't change it. Like, why would you break something that was working so well? I think massive kudos to the manager for actually making the change when he did. He's clearly not overly proud or overly stubborn about what he wants to do. Do you know what I mean? He'll make the changes as he sees fit. I thought they pinned us back more than anything else in the wide areas. They play, obviously, with their 375 wingers that they've got. And it just, that first half, Stevenson and Dabo never once broke out, really, you know, like actually attacking. And Fordyce ended up basically playing as a right back, which definitely didn't suit him. But it wasn't his best performance in a Rovers jersey. But yeah, it was. I wasn't massively surprised when I saw the team lineup. I was disappointed, obviously, with Stanton losing out. And I kind of said before the game, it's asking a hell of a lot of Scott Brown, because Byrne's going to give you what Byrne's going to give you. And you're asking Brown to fill in the gap that's left by Stanton, which I think is a hell of an ask. And as it showed, it didn't work.
Yeah, it was. I think there's a lot of food for thought in what you've said there. I think firstly you've got to give Partick their kudos that they are a team on the up. They've been winning games. In particular, Chalmers has started to really come onto a game over the last few weeks. Brian Graham's started getting back in among the goals, whereas Ayr feel like they're a team that are in the, rather than being in the ascendancy, the descendancy, would you say? I don't know. Yeah. But it feels like Ayr
on the slide, I think.
On the slide, a very good football
like
cliche there to use.
Like a bubbles burst.
Almost certainly. But yeah, and as well, yeah, it's rightfully fair to say, I think, that if you change the formation, then you're going straight away almost into a sort of what can be used as a plan B, and that's the way that yesterday and out. Leslie, just to turn to you now, just a bit of an omission from the squad there, in the sense that Aidan Connolly didn't make the bench. Do you think, again, we spoke about it a bit pre-match, but just your thoughts on that, just now that we've got the depth, it makes it a bit more difficult for some of the players to actually get even onto the bench now as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I was surprised, not just by the fact that Connolly wasn't on the bench, but that Kai Montague was on the bench ahead of him. And I do not mean that for a second to sound disrespectful to Kai Montague, but he's a very young lad who's probably playing in his first season in the leagues. He's got great potential, but he's perhaps not the kind of player that you would expect to be sort of coming onto the pitch in a game like this. However, I then listened to Neill Collins' interview after the game, and he name-checked Kai Montague. He says he's been doing really well in training, and the kind of nuance and undercurrent there being that we're hoping to see him on the pitch sometime soon. And he mentioned Josh Mullen in the same breath as well, which does kind of indicate that Connolly has fallen down the pecking order quite a bit. If you're thinking the manager's looking at Kai Montague, a very young player with a lot of potential ahead of you, is also then the post-match, name-checking Josh Mullen. So I was surprised by that, but I think it does reflect a trend we've seen for a few weeks, that you can see for whatever reason Aidan Connolly's not getting a lot of game time. I suspect my hunch is that when we are using wingers, that Neill Collins is wanting more pace. As we know, one thing that Connolly is fantastic at is cutting in and unleashing rockets of shots, and occasionally getting your own header against Kirk Broadfoot as well. But he doesn't necessarily give you the directness and the pace and the energy that Finlay Pollock and Lewis Gibson and also Lewis Jameson, if you're using him there, give you. So you get the feeling that Connolly's skill set is maybe not what the manager's looking for.
I think there's also, just very quickly on that point, Les, I think there's also a marked change in the use of the wingers. Pollock has now been used on the right. Gibson is now being used on the left. And when he moved Jameson out wide, he moved him to the left. And I think there's actually a bit of a moving away from the winger on the wrong side, cutting in on his stronger foot, which is 100% Aidan Connolly's game. Like, that's what he does. But I don't think that's what the manager wants.
Yeah. I think that it's a tough position to be in when you're trying to, because again, Egan Connolly obviously had that season 2 seasons ago where he was renowned for what he was doing. He was one of the best players in that league at that point, just how the performances that he was putting in. And he really basically saved us from being in a relegation mire. But 2 years down the line, I think it's very difficult in terms of to get into a squad like we're playing at the moment, particularly with the way that we're switching between these formations, to really have that opportunity to do so. So it'll be intriguing to see how sort of the next few weeks pan out as to whether that changes or what happens, because we've seen other players come in where they maybe look like they've been on the cold and then it's just been perception and it's not actually been the case. Lewis Gibson's probably a good example of that, as to sort of look like he was sort of really struggling to get into the pitch, not getting game time, and then all of a sudden it was like straight back in, being able to sort of utilise him in games. So we started the game, and Scott, you rightfully said it only took 6 minutes for Partick Thistle to make an impact with Logan Chalmers swinging a brilliant cross there for Brian Graham. Just your thoughts on the goal? Was there maybe any point that you thought that we could have done better, and just how the game started overall?
I mean, I would say that obviously for the majority of the first half, but especially right at the start, I thought Partick came out pretty much flying. I thought they were really good. Kind of, as we know, they're always going to cause you problems out wide with all the sort of tricky wingers that they've got. They've got a fair bit of pace down the sides, and they're all very technical ball players. It's not like one's just out and out pace. Like, all of their wingers are pretty technical players as well. So you've always got to obviously keep your sort of mind on it at all times, especially if you're a centre half in a back three. You're up against Brian Graham, and somebody's got to always be looking at Brian Graham, and you've got to have good sort of communication in between the back line. But I think it was a mixture of kind of breakdown in communication, but I also feel a wee bit sorry for Lewis Stevenson out wide when it came to the cross itself. Looking back, especially at the highlights, you can see that he's in mixed minds whether to go with Megwa, who's doing the sort of overlap, or to stick with Logan Chalmers, who's got the ball at the time. And then you've got Byrne, who's kind of also looking like, do I go out and try and help him, or do I go in the box to try and either block across or head it away or whatever? And then you've also got... I think he's in mixed minds. Liam Dick looks like he's in mixed minds whether to go out and chase it as well. And it just seemed to be that it gave Logan Chalmers just that little bit extra time to just set himself up. And nobody can complain. It's a fantastic cross into the box, good header, no chance of Kev. But I do think that we gave him just that little bit too much time to set it all up, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that Brian Graham's really made a career out of being in the right place at the right time, and that's one of his sort of a classic Brian Graham goal, just being there exactly where you need him. And I think that's, again, it's something that we've sort of said that we've maybe missed over the last few seasons, but there he is, and he continues to do it.
Really good forward play from Graham as well. I think that, like, I watched it back, and I did the usual thing I always do as a Rovers fan, because I know Les is keeping tally, and it's another goal from a cross ball into the box. But I'm like, right, whose fault is it this week? And you watch it, and you instantly go, right, Fordyce has lost the man. Actually, Graham's lost him. Fordyce hasn't switched off or whatever. I mean, he'll want it back. He'll absolutely want that opportunity. Like, he'll regret, I would imagine, losing him. But Graham does that thing where he goes, he stops, he comes back, he checks his run. Really clever forward play, and a absolutely stunning cross into the box on his head. He doesn't have to move for it, and a good header. Sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and go, do you know what? That's a good goal.
Yeah, Les, just again, it was another goal from coming the wide areas, just to add to your tally. What did you make of it?
That's 23. So that's the 23rd goal from a cross ball into the box in this calendar year in competitive games. So I think, like Blair says, and it's like, like Jim Clark often says on Raith TV as well, other teams are allowed to play well. And you can look back and there are little things that you can say, yeah, we could have done that differently. We could have given Chalmers a bit less time. But it's an excellent delivery from Chalmers, and that's what Brian Graham does. Kev stays in his line, that's fine. Even if he'd come for it, it was an absolute bullet of a cross, and it would probably have taken his hands off if he'd tried to connect with it. So he does the right thing, I think. Stays in his line, and it's just a very good cross into Graham, who knows every trick in the book and positions himself perfectly to head it in. So you do just have to say fair play. That's a really good Partick goal, and what they are capable of.
Yeah, so the game resumed and it seemed to really ebb and flow, with Partick looking a bit more aggressive, but Rovers still weren't out of it. Scott Lewis Jamieson had a sort of chance, and Dylan Easton had a free kick that he tried to put under the wall, which came back out to Fangy Dabo, who unfortunately couldn't do too much given the sort of proximity of the defenders. What were you making of the first half performance, and just were you a bit worried given the sort of away record that we've got and where we were at? Just talk us through the rest of the first half, really.
Aye, well, the free kick, from my stream anyway, that I was watching it on, it just looked like it was a horrendous free kick. And I was just like, you can't be doing that when it's right on the edge of the box. Such a big chance. But then Dylan goes on to say it in his interview, like, oh, they didn't put anybody like underneath as a, what are they calling that these days? The sort of guy that blocks it at the back. But they didn't put one down, and so he was like, oh, I thought I might be cheeky and try and go underneath the wall, but somebody was lucky enough, didn't jump high enough. But no, in terms of, I thought for the rest of the first half, I would say, we had our chances, but I thought we were getting to half-time lucky to still be only one goal down. I mean, Partick hit the post. They had another few chances that kind of were crosses, kind of flying across the box. There was a few other... Fordyce nearly actually scored an own goal as well when he actually made a good stop to allow it not going to Brian Graham, but it almost ended up in our own net anyway. But I think if I was to go on chances alone in terms of the first half, I would have said if we had gone in 3-1 down at half-time, I couldn't have complained. I thought it was very much a game of... It was more than a 1-0 game, I thought, in that first half especially, but and for the whole game I thought it was quite an entertaining game, but I do feel that we were a little bit lucky, and I was glad that we got in at 1-0, to be honest, overall.
Yeah, I doubt you'll find many people that will disagree with you on that front. Partick really seemed to be on the ascendancy. I think the real big chance, Blair, came... Kyle, we lost the ball in midfield. I think Scott Brown got pickpocketed off it. Kyle Turner threads it through to Brian Graham, who lashes one off the post. Just were you quite worried at that point that it might become a bit of an unassailable lead?
Yeah, no, I get what Scott's saying, and I agree, performance-wise, it wasn't great, but we were still kind of creating chances, so we were never... It never felt like they were running away with it. They were definitely on top. There's no getting away from that. We were, the angle I was in the Colin Weir stand, we were literally in line between sort of Brian Graham and the post, so you saw it leaving his boot, and it was like, oh, nah. And then it came back off the post. I was so happy, because it's actually, again, a really good bit of forward play for him. But, for me, and it's going to sound daft, and it's going to make me sound like a happy clapper, and I'm honestly not trying to be, but even when we were playing poorly, and we were, and I think it was Dylan Easton was talking about it in his post-match, for all that we were bad, and we weren't terrible, but we weren't good, we still created some chances. And that in itself feels like an improvement, because there are so many games this season, last season, where when we were out of it, we were out of it. We were so far away from goal. We were so far away from lacing anything together. But do you know what? Jamieson had 2 pretty good shots on goal. One, I mean, he was really unlucky with. But it became a kind of it became a game where we were clinging on to an extent, but there was green shoots of something there. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it definitely didn't feel like we were out of it. It didn't feel like we were in it, but it didn't feel like we were out of it.
Yeah, I think that you always knew that the good thing about this team is that, especially with the depth that we've got, that Neill Collins has the ability to make changes. But we'll come on to that just in a bit. Just Leslie, just come back to yourself just now. the chance for Lewis Jamieson gets threaded in by Dylan Easton right at the end of the first half, 1-on-1, and just puts it wide of the post. Just your thoughts on that opportunity there for LJ, and just sort of, again, as Blair says, were you quite optimistic moving forward after that, thinking, right, we're still in this game? Partick Thistle have had a lot of big chances, but they're doing a classic Raith Rovers of not burying a team while they come up.
Before we talk about Jamieson's big chance, I'm going to rewind a little bit to Easton's mazy run through the middle, which was a few minutes before, which I'm watching it and I'm thinking, this is either going to be goal of the season or it's going to end up in the nature reserve behind Firhill. And I did wonder, at the time I was like, oh, what a waste, he's just sclaffed it. But then I listened to his interview, and actually when I watched the replay, I could see actually he was, I think, trying to thread Hamilton in, but he just had a bit too much Weetabix on it. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
He was shooting and slipped.
Oh, I'm going to be a bit shy. I like to tell myself that he did. Anyway, it was a fantastic run, but it just, until the final point.
Shades of Tannadice.
As we know, exactly, as we know with Easton, if he's got the confidence to try something like that and he's having one of those games, he will. But aye, sure that's right enough, not long after that, Jamieson then gets played in. And again, at the time I was like, oh, that's rubbish, he's missed. What a waste that was. Again, I saw the highlights at 10 o'clock and I actually thought he's really unlucky because he's done really well to get as close as he did with the angle that he had. Bearing in mind he was hitting off his left foot and he's got the goalkeeper there, and a defender coming in as well, and the post. To get as close as he did was a pretty good effort. And again, the fact he's getting himself into the position to take these chances is encouraging. So, I mean, Partick had chances, absolutely. And like Scott says, they could have been a couple of goals to the good. I said to everybody around me when the half-time whistle went, if this had been us and we'd been 1-0 up and we'd had all these chances, we know exactly what's going to happen in the second half, and it's not going to be favourable to us. We know, if it had been the other way around, we would know exactly what was going to happen. So I think, we got in at 1-0. We hadn't been actively bad. It hadn't been like the second half at Morton away. It hadn't been like the game at East End. It hadn't been like Airdrie. It wasn't as good, but it wasn't actively dreadful. So I was quietly optimistic at half time.
Yeah, Leslie, I'm just thinking there, our opponents feel like they're like the Black Knight out of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they're just sitting there and they've had their arms and legs chopped off, but you still know they'll come at you and attack you.
Exactly.
So we do come to half-time. Blair, just Callum Fordyce comes on and he's replaced by Finlay Pollock at half-time, and we switch up to that more familiar 4-2-3-1. Just talk us through your thoughts when you saw that change and just how important that was.
Yeah, it was absolutely the right move. I think just the nature of the way that they were playing, we were getting pulled so wide. The back three was so split that actually that's where they were getting their joy, was almost straight through the middle of us. So moving to the back four was really sensible. I did question it at half time when he made the change, in the sense that Hanlon was on a booking, and I did wonder if taking Fordyce off was wise. But Hanlon's so good, you can't. I mean, and he's also experienced enough to play with a booking. Like, it's not the end of the world for him. Yeah, definitely the right move. I think it solidified us, and you could see right off the bat in the second half that they'd come out, and their half-time team talk was obviously go out and do the same again, go out and get them. And they came out at half-time and went, oh, hang on, why are you over here? And they just never really got a grip of it. And we started to get a bit of ascendancy into the game, which was really good. And then we actually got the best out of, at that point, we got the best out of Scott Brown, because he wasn't trying to cover like 3/4 of the pitch kind of thing. And actually, I think it just made us look a little bit more cohesive at that point. It brought the best out of Stevenson and Dabo as well. Weirdly, they started to get forward more. And I think it was because the wingers were being pinned back a little bit more, and their fullbacks didn't have the invitation to bomb on the way that they had in the first half. So we started to get a little bit more joy kind of all over the park. So as I said before we got into the game, kudos to Neill Collins. Like, he deserves a lot of credit there, because for all that I always liked, the thing I always liked about Ian Murray was that he would he made substitutions that changed the game. They weren't always positive. Sometimes Murray Ball fell apart. But we'd come from having McGlynn, where it was like for like substitutions every week. Like, you never changed anything. So it was refreshing to have that. But actually, it's really refreshing to have a manager who seems to actually have watched the first half. That sounds really bad. But he made the right change at the right time and with the right personnel. And I loved his description after the game about why he did it. Pace, big pitch, let's stretch them, let's pin them back and stop them pinning us back. Like, yeah, great decision.
I think you've mentioned every one of the defenders there, but I'm going to give a wee bit of praise as well to Liam Dick, because Graham Meldrum will be in my ear. Scott, just to get your thoughts on this, just how I had described him during the week as being quite malleable, in the sense that he's gone from being a left back, and now nobody really questions the fact that we've brought off a sort of naturalised centre back and just kept Liam Dick in there. Just your thoughts in terms of how well he's done to adapt his game over the last sort of 6 to 8 months or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've whenever I've been talking to my dad about the Rovers over the last, I would say this year especially, that Liam Dick, I think, is actually a far better centre-half than he is a fullback. Like, he's so much better in the air than he is like a footballer. Like, whether that might sound harsh to him or whatever, but
I was going to say it's a compliment, but it's a dig, right?
It's a compliment in terms of being a centre half, but it's not a compliment in terms of being a fullback,
totally.
Which he was technically signed to be. But I think it was always going to come to the fact that we signed Lewis Stevenson, and Lewis Stevenson has played at a high level compared to him. He's a better sort of technical player as well. But I do think that Liam Dick's got attributes to be a good centre-half, and I'm glad that we're actually using him there, because I think I was worried that we were going to bring him in games where he's not really played a lot of football, because it's going to be Hanlon. At the time, I thought it would be Hanlon and Murray with Fordyce on the bench, or Hanlon and Fordyce. But we've played, obviously, a back three, and it meant that Dicko's managed to get like a fair amount of games already. So he's coming in and he's already playing regular minutes, so he's not coming in cold, sort of thing. So I think, to be honest, as you say, like, going forward, I wouldn't be against, if we're playing a back four, having him in the left side of the centre-half pairing. I would be happy with that, because, as I say, I genuinely think he is a decent centre-half, and going forward, I hope he just continues to play centre-half for us, because unless, obviously, Lewis Stevenson was to get an injury or something, that's the only reason that you would then maybe put him back at left back. But I think his best position genuinely is at centre half. But I thought he was solid again yesterday as well for the full game. There was a couple of times, obviously, in the second half where he maybe left a pass short, especially there was one from the free kick for Hanlon where he's went to hit with his right foot and he's massively under-hit it. But thankfully, it was him that also went and corrected his own mistake and got the block in from, was it Chalmers, I think, that had went onto it? That was then going to be a sort of easy cutback to Brian Graham. So he did well to sort of correct that. But no, I thought he was pretty solid for most of the game.
I thought Hanlon sent him up the river on that one, to be perfectly fair, on that free kick.
I thought the two of them were at it, to be honest.
Yeah. You actually, see, if you watch the highlights, you see Brian Graham hiding behind, I think it's Sean Byrne he's standing beside, but he's like hiding behind him and he's watching Hanlon, and as he goes to kick it, he starts running. I'm like, it was just awful. Really bad all round.
Let's not focus too much on the awful bits, though. We'll move on. Leslie, Neill Collins obviously happy at half-time to add in sort of numbers forward, bringing on Finlay Pollock, who looked really assured in that second half. Were you quite happy to see that he's got that sort of ruthless streak there, as Blair sort of mentioned before, obviously, just being willing to change it quite early, not being afraid to sort of say, I've got to wait until like the 60th minute mark or a certain point before switching things up?
Absolutely. But I also think it was done sensibly. So I'm going to cast my mind back to last time I was at Firhill, which was the 2-2 game, the first day of last season. And we had Scott McGill at right back, who was having a horrible game. And Ian Murray is outside his box, actually on the pitch, screaming blue murder at him. And you're kind of thinking, right, you're screaming at a young boy who's playing out of position. What are you actually trying to achieve? Collins, I get the feeling, is a bit more measured and a bit different. So you could see in the first half, Fordyce was getting a bollocking off Collins at various points. You could see
really
the laser beams coming out of Collins' eyes. But Fordyce is old enough and experienced enough to know he's had a bad game. He may have been carrying a knock, we don't know, we're given the benefit of the doubt, but Fordyce, he'll know that he didn't have a good game. He knows that. You can take something like that off and you can say, look, you're not having a great game, we're going to change it up. It's the right change to make. Somebody else actually, just as an aside, I think Dabo got a bit of a bollocking at half-time too, because I was not impressed with him in the first half. I felt like he was trying to collect moments for his highlights reel rather than aiding the team. And he did it at Livingston. I called him out for it on the pod then when he was nutmegging Robbie Muirhead. He did the same at Harry Mill. You know, he had the beating of him once and then kind of retreated into for the rest of the half into trying to hang Milne out to dry whenever he could. He absolutely knuckled down in the second half though and concentrated on bodying people off the ball and playing in Pollock. So I think there was the tactical changes, but they were done sensibly with players that can handle it and can understand it's a tactical change, coupled with a manager who, you know, is not afraid to give players who are some of the older and more experienced guys in the team a bit of a bollocking. So I was very, very pleased with that, and it paid dividends pretty soon after the second half got underway.
See, just really quickly, my highlight of that in the first half, I'm pretty sure it was Fordyce, and because it went really quiet in the stand, and you actually heard Collins stepping out to the front, and they just went, "Oh, you're going to win a header." That was it. Just stopped, and they all went, "Oh, yeah, fair enough." It's great.
I suppose he was also a centre half in his day, so like he can tell him what he's got to be doing. So
Totally.
Well, the second half started very, very end to end. There was that initial, Scott, we sort of spoke about it before we came on, but just talk us through sort of the Rovers error that got corrected when Chalmers attempted a cutback, and then just the break up the pitch all the way up to sort of inspired by Scott Brown to end up with that Lewis Jamieson sort of palm stinger. What did you make of that, and just how the game was flown from end to end in the second half initially?
I mean, I think for a good sort of 20 minutes, I would say the game was a wee bit like a basketball game in terms of going from one end to the other. And the fact that we changed our formation, I think it allowed us to go more direct, especially when we brought on Lewis Gibson as well. So you had the two young lads out with extra pace, and you've got Milne and Megwa, who aren't slow, like either of them, but they've also just played 60 minutes of football compared to, well, Pollock obviously came in at half time, but Gibson's came on for the last 30, and they two are just going to inject a lot of pace and just going to keep going at them for 45 minutes, 30 minutes, and just say, look, I'm just going to keep coming all game for you. So whether it was clearly something that the manager had thought about at half time, and I think it was the correct thing to do. Obviously I touched on it when I was talking about Liam Dick, but the whole nonsense with Hanlon taking the free kick and it's gone to Dicko. Dicko's then fluffed the pass to, I think it was going to Stevenson, or trying to, and then obviously Chalmers has tried to cut it back. But Bruni did it, I think, at least 4 or 5 times, and then Les put it into the group chat this morning, like a clip of 20 seconds, like a highlight reel of him just getting the ball and just doing his usual sprinting away down the pitch, running around. But he was just a man on a mission to get us back in the game, like the whole second half. And that's what you want for your captain, is literally to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and just go, look, I'm going to be the one that's taking us over the line here to get something for the game. And obviously, I thought Jamieson in the first half, obviously, he's had them 2 chances, especially, and you think, well, is this going to be his day in terms of in front of goal, whereas the week before it was his day. But I thought he did well to just at least test the keeper from the angle he was at. And then he started to, I think we spoke about in the group chat, so he started to hit the ball quite hard. Whereas before it was kind of, it didn't look like he was putting full power into shots and the keeper was getting sort of easy work with it. But no, I think in general terms, I thought that whole second half was kind of like a basketball game in terms of just how open it was in the midfield. There was at times that I wondered if Bannigan had been taken off at one point, because I hadn't even noticed him in the middle of the park, whereas in the first half you could see him sort of breaking up playing and trying to stop Dylan Easton at times as well. But second half, I barely even noticed him at all in the middle of the park.
He was man marking Dylan Easton. He was just following him all over the pitch.
You noticed him
Everywhere
in the
Easton
first
went.
half doing it. Second half, I didn't even see him at all.
He got their man of the match, too.
I was going to say that. I think that's the issue that got caused for them by us switching to the 4-2-3-1. Like we, particularly Pollock, but also when we bring on Gibson and Matthews, just the aggression that you can create in that sort of going into their final third just meant that Barragan's not so easy in terms of his job for tracking, because you've got the wide players that are pinning back your full backs. It makes it easier, as you've sort of said, for Stevenson and Dabo. Blair, just talk us through those changes. Again, Hamilton and Byrne coming off, replaced by Gibson and Matthews. Just did you think that was the right move at the time, just to sort of switch things up and add a bit more sort of pace on the wings and aggression in midfield?
Yeah, Hamilton didn't have his best 90 minutes or 60, 70 minutes or whatever he played. It wasn't his best game for us. I think that's fair. But I also think that Partick kind of suit defending against him. Like, his game is big and physical. They've got two. I mean, they both played for us last season for a spell. One where there's only 20 minutes, but they're two season centre halves. Like, they will win their headers. They will do their job. Like, there's absolutely no doubt. And so Hamilton didn't get an awful lot of joy. He got a really good flick on in the first half to Jameson for his first effort on goal. But when Collins made the change, so the initial change that he made put Jameson out wide. Obviously, the change of formation put Jameson out wide left. He wasn't really getting an awful lot of joy out there, and Hamilton wasn't getting any joy through the middle. I was actually really pleased to see that his decision was to put Jameson back up top, because he seemed to be our most consistent threat. He's quite single-minded, Lewis Jameson. Like, he just strikes me as one of these players who just wants to score goals. Just what do you want to do? I want to score goals. Let me score goals. Very Zach Rudden, but just want to score goals. So no, I thought the changes were really good. I thought Gibson, it was a wee bit kind of sloppy once or twice with passes, but he's not played a lot of football, and I was actually really impressed with how quickly he got up to the pace of the game, and got involved. And we really did start to stretch them at that point and start to kind of pin them back. And there was a spell of about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes where we looked like we were going to score. We looked like we were going to win the game. It then ebbed the other way, and they had kind of 5 minutes where you're like, oh my God, can we just see the final whistle now? But that was just the kind of nature of the game. And we spoke about it in the pre-match, that they're two pretty well-matched sides, to be fair. Like, there's very little between the two teams. And I would imagine it was as stressful as that first half was for us, and I imagine it's as stressful as it was for a Partick fan in the second half. I think if you're a neutral watching that, it's probably quite an entertaining game of football, actually. Quite kind of well-matched sides and quite a good game. But again, I thought, to answer your question, all of his subs yesterday, I thought they were all really done with purpose. Like Les said earlier on, like, it was done sensibly. He thought about what he wanted to do, and he had a real justification and a reason for doing it.
Yeah. To go back to your point about Jameson, I really like the fact that, and I felt it was something that we would potentially look to do by using him up top, is sort of having those sort of curved runs past the last man. You saw it a few times when Dylan Easton thread him through and there was sort of balls into the box. He had a couple of opportunities like that.
Yeah.
Very... strange to say, but very Callum Smith-esque. Callum Smith's very good at those as well. And that's what you like to see, sort of just a pacey player getting in behind and sort of try to get away quickly from their man. So it comes up to just the 65th minute mark. We get a free kick on the edge of the box. Fanky Dabo absolutely hammers a ball. Just your thoughts on the handball, Leslie, and just your reaction when you saw that there. Were you convinced immediately that it was a handball, or did you think he'd taken one in the dish, going full John Hughes style?
To be honest, I thought Fanky had knocked Dan O'Reilly unconscious. Because I mean, he's got a cannon of a shot on him, and you could see. I can't remember what happened. There'd been a stramash before, which I think had originated through Sean Byrne doing Sean Byrne stuff and choosing not to shoot when he really should have, and instead playing the ball out. But it ended up coming out. Fanky was the sort of furthest away from the goal and hit an absolute cannon of a shot, which, as I say, I thought had caught Dan O'Reilly in the temple, and I was thinking, oh my God, I know he left us for Partick, but I don't want to see a man leaving a pitch unconscious on a stretcher with his arms flopping down the side kind of thing. But thankfully he started moving, and it turned out when we saw the replay that it was actually his arm had come up and there was contact. And on one hand, you think, well, it is a natural motion. You do not want to be knocked unconscious, but by the book, that is a free kick. So I was absolutely not going to complain. You can see Funky's actually quite fancying himself for taking free kicks. You saw him standing over a few of them. You saw himself lining himself up. And he had a... Which game was it? Was it the Airdrie game when he had a shot? It was one of our games at Starks, and he had a shot in front of the North Stand. He's only got one career goal in the league. But he's obviously fancying adding to that while he's here.
Yeah.
But to come back to your point, yeah, absolutely a free kick. And John Hughes, as Scott said in our group chat, would be disappointed. Ewan Murray will also be disappointed. It was Robbie that you said that would be disappointed, didn't take one in the dish.
Do you know, I think I've said before, you can always judge it by the reaction of the players, whether it's a free kick or not.
Yeah.
And the only person that argued was Brian Graham, which means it's definitely a free kick.
Probably made the referees mind up for him.
Yeah.
Blair, just up next, can you confirm for us, is water wet?
It is, yes. It is absolutely wet. What a goal. Like, unbelievable. To get the ball up and down as he did. But, my goodness. Like, just the technique. It was actually, my favourite thing of last night was watching so Davy Hancock played the video of the goal back to him. And in true kind of Soccer Saturday style, like, we watched his reaction of watching the goal, and it's the cheeky wee smile on his face where he's like, "Whoa, actually, that's pretty special." Yeah, lovely. Absolutely tremendous. Just, I don't think any of us are going to do it any justice. Like, the technique.
Just beautiful stuff. Let's sort of ask this question before. Just, Scott, where does that rank in terms of your free kicks of all time? Is it up there?
In terms of, like, Rovers free kicks?
Yeah, by all means.
I mean, I was obviously, as we've been recording, it's kind of been in the back of my mind thinking about free kicks over the years. And I tell you, somebody else who he had a few decent free kicks in his time, and other than set pieces, he was a bit a lazy player at times, but always scored a belter. Alan Walker scored a few right good free kicks, like when he played. I think he got one. Both in at the South Stand that I can remember was one against Falkirk and one against Dundee. It might have been even the same season, I can't mind, but he was always pretty good. Bobby Sloan was also pretty decent for a free kick, curled in a few.
Yeah, absolutely.
Connolly's had a few as well, so I couldn't really pick out one that stands out massively, but obviously fresh in the mind for yesterday that Easton's has got to be up there, because it is the technique, especially when you've seen what he did in the first half with his free kick as well. You're going, well, he's clearly thought about it again. It was kind of too close to try and go up and over the wall, and I think the keeper's not going to save it, but at the same time the keeper might say to himself, did I maybe give him too much of that side to have the chance to even think about it? But I mean, no, I think you can't take anything away from Easton. It's a superb strike, and I think I don't think he'll win it, but he'll be up there for goal of the season with that. Second behind Lewis Stevenson.
And Leslie, just for yourself, have you got any free kicks in mind that are jumping out for you at the moment?
I do. So I've got two. So the first one is a Rovers one, and this was Stephen McInespie against Goldteam Trotted Flag in the UEFA Cup.
Beautiful.
In an absolutely beautiful free kick. Now the story is, and I don't know if this is true, the story is that Kevin Keegan and Teddy McDermott, who were the Newcastle management team, were up watching him at the time, and that they were sitting in the main stand. And I think this is one of these stories that's grown arms and legs over time. We don't know if it's ever true, but the story is they saw that free kick go in, they looked at each other, stood up and left. And he then didn't go to Newcastle, then he went to Bolton. So I don't know how that's true.
Where's John Greer when you need him?
Exactly. I'm sure he'll be
the
straight
other
in.
one as well is it's not a Rovers free kick. And when I was in primary school, as a neutral on a Wednesday night, I went to see a cup tie between Motherwell and Ross County at Victoria Park. Derek Adams scored a very good free kick. However, Dylan Easton's free kick was a million times better than that. I mean, come on. Any chance? A million times better.
Oh.
So for me, Stevie McInnesby's and Easton's are probably about the same level.
And Blair, you got any that are coming to mind?
Yeah, there's a couple. Yesterday's reminded me actually of Scott mentioned him, but Bobby Sloan against Brechin in front of the South Stand. Just in terms of the technique to get it up and down. We were also reminiscing yesterday because so my nephew was 16 yesterday, and he was born the day after a game at East Fife against Bayview. Against East Fife at Bayview. My God. But Bobby Sloan scored a free kick that day as well. I remember that being a particularly good one. And the only other one that springs to mind, actually, and it's because it always amused me, and it was Brian Graham
against
Devon Vale. Because I remember literally standing up in the South Stand and shouting, "Get him away for that in free kick," because there was like, there's no way he's taking this, and then I just had to sit down and go, fair enough.
It was like 90th minute and it was about 30 yards out, and I was going to mention that one. The only reason that is because as soon as his boot struck it, my friend said he's done it, and then it was about like 2 seconds before the ball hit the net because it was that far out, and he just tore away celebrating.
Gullen had a few too. Gullen had one last season, didn't he? Was it Inverness?
Aye.
Was it Inverness? Can't remember.
He hit the bar against Queen's Park. I think in the final.
I always remember Gullen being really unlucky with free kicks. Like, it would be a brilliant strike and it would hit the bar or the post, or the keeper would pull it a great save, and you go, Gullen could have had a few like belters if he wasn't quite as unlucky.
Total deja vu, because I remember having this conversation on the podcast. So somebody scored a belt over a free kick at some point.
Probably Connolly, because he's the most recent.
Look at my memory here.
What are you saying, Leslie?
Ramon Pereira was very good at free kicks, and I have a memory of Ramon Pereira scoring a very good free kick somewhere. I can't remember where it was. I need to go and see if I can find any highlights.
I feel like the stats for it would be. I'd like to look at the stats for it, so I'm not going to do it myself, Leslie. This is a really, really blatant hint to like get an Excel spreadsheet out. For me, I feel like Robert Sloan, his free kicks were so memorable because they were like really high impact ones in terms of like games against like Brechin, East Fife.
Don't say bad things about the Robert of Sloan.
But for me, Ryan Conroy seemed to score free kicks all the time. He had one against. I remember one against Cowdenbeath, Dumbarton,
Ibrox.
He had the one at Ibrox as well.
Ibrox, yeah.
Like, just felt like he was scoring them all the time. But be interesting to see the stats as to whether it's just preferential bias just because it was Bobby Sloan. Everyone loved Bobby Sloan, so yeah. Anyway,
just pulling up the goal of the season reel from last season because there was definitely a belter last season.
While Blair's doing that, Scott, just want to talk. Dylan Easton, do you think it is safe to say that he had a very assured performance yesterday, put in a really strong shift, creating quite a lot, and had the goal as well? Just how much of a sort of talismanic presence do you think he is in this team? And just, again, obviously we've sort of had a bit of back and forth in terms of like the other side of Dylan Easton, which is like the cheat bookings, etc. But do you think you've got to yesterday's him really showing his value in terms of the side?
I mean, like, I think it was after the Ayr game when BBC were doing the man of the match stuff with Lewis Stevenson, and they asked about Dylan in it very briefly, and he said, "Look, I've told Dylan already in the short time that I've been here, he could be an incredible player, but he's just far too inconsistent now." And Christ, we've said that nearly all the time that he's been at the Rovers, to be honest, that he's clearly got the talent and he's clearly a good player at this level, but he just needs to be slightly more consistent. And it just seems to be, though, that if he probably was consistent, he probably wouldn't be playing worse and probably wasn't also in the lower leagues. I know that he kind of fell out of love with football and stuff like that during his sort of early years in football, but I think if he was a bit more consistent, he probably would be in the Premiership, to be honest. But no, overall, I think he had a really solid game yesterday, and the goal just kind of topped it off in terms of the performance. So if we can get more, of these games than the sort of not so good ones, or the ones that he's kind of wasteful. I mean, because we've got to be honest, there is times where he is kind of maybe
Yeah.
holding the ball a bit too long, and the chance is gone where he could have slipped somebody in down the sort of line, or if it's maybe Jack Hamilton's made a run or whatever, and he's maybe held on to it, and the chance is gone. But there's also times where he'll pull out something out of nothing at all, and you go, where's he seen that, or how's he done that, or whatever. And that, as it is, he's the showman, as was said. So I think if we can keep getting sort of the performances, as I say, like yesterday, we'll be sort of more happier than not with him.
Yeah, it's there's 2 points I would sort of say about that. Firstly, is Blair mentioned it before, but it's exactly the same as Kevin Dabrowski. Like, you've got to take the weaknesses you've got to take the rough with the smooth, basically, in the sense that, like, there are going to be mistakes, and I think there was no bigger game than that so far this season. We've probably seen the derby at Easton Park, where he just nothing was breaking for Dylan Easton. But you've got to accept it's kind of like a percentages game where there's going to be times where he's just an absolute menace for the opposition, and that he'll come into his game and he'll do things like he was doing yesterday. Just to, again, I know that it's been spoken a bit about already, Leslie, but just a bit of a word about the importance of Scott Brown in the team and just his performance yesterday. You obviously put together that video for us, just him charging about the pitch, but just, again, just a bit of words about him.
Right, so who here's played Crash Bandicoot?
Yep.
Anybody ever played Crash Bandicoot? Now, you get these masks, these tribal masks. I mean, you couldn't do this now, you'd get cancelled for this, but you collect them. And it's just one of these computer game things. And when you get 3 of them, you get this kind of temporary invincibility, and like this tribal music kicks in. And the character in the computer game, I'd noticed this last season, he runs, but the way he runs, it's like how Scott Brown runs. Like, he sticks his elbows out and he kind of hunches forward a bit. And he's actually got a fair turn of speed. And I watched Scott Brown running with the ball last season. I was like, that's like Crash Bandicoot when you get these masks, and he just charges and he just goes. And yesterday was like that with Scott Brown. Like, he was picking the ball up, and I made a highlight reel, and I think we can put it up in the socials later if we're not going to get a copyright strike from Sony or somebody, of just Scott Brown charging down the pitch, with his arms out and his head hunched forward, bombing forward. And that was so important for us in the second half. Yesterday, there was 3 or 4 times he just went on these runs like he'd got the mask on in Crash Bandicoot and just took everybody straight out of play. Something I'd said, I'd kind of moaned in the first half, and I'd said without Stanton in the back in the 3, we're a mid-table team at best. I think that's maybe a bit harsh on balance, but what I do think is you can mask, if you excuse the pun, the lack of Stanton better in a 4 than you can in a 3. With the pace down the wings, and also with Brown driving on in the midfield, you can actually make up for not having Stanton, I think, more easily with the players that we have in a 4 than a 3. But he was tremendous yesterday. It was an absolute, what you'd call a captain's performance. Just the pace, the turning. He was unlucky not to have a goal late on. He combined so well with Pollock at a number of points, combined really well with Finlay Pollock down the right, and he was unlucky to just scoop that shot over the bar, because that would have capped his day off brilliantly. But another terrific performance through the middle for Scott Brown.
I actually thought, sorry, just to come in here, I thought Bruni at the sort of the final 5-10 minutes with his chances, it was very Scott McTominay-esque in terms of late into the box and getting the shot off. Yeah. Like, it was just how we've gotten to know McTominay, like, in the national side, and how he's went on to how he's doing in Napoli as well. But just that sort of late run, because, I mean, like, the centre-halves are kind of set for a ball sort of flashing across goal, and then all of a sudden, Pollock's had the sort of vision to see that Bruni's came in late and just went, well, I can just slide this back, and he's just ran onto it perfectly. And he had, I think, 2 shots that I definitely remember him having, that one went over the bar and one was a good save, but you're going, well, on another day he could be lucky enough to get one of them in, and obviously then, with it being that late on, you could go on and win the game as well. But there's times where I get a little bit of McTominay vibes off of Bruni when he's going in and around the box.
I think it's helped by the fact that we've got Matthews and Byrne in there to be able to sort of use to bring the best out of his game as well. For me, it fries my head a bit that Scott Brown was playing at Peterhead for as long as he did, because they had him
Wild.
and Grant Savoury in midfield, and the two of them are just. Grant Savory's he's coming back from an ACL injury. I was saying this earlier in the chat. He's still at Queen's Park, but just he's having issues with his rehab, which is obviously a shame to see, because I think he was a real reason that Queen's Park finished as highly as they did. But yes, Scott Brown, just what a signing he's been through Ian Murray, and just the energy that he brings into the midfield. I think the final main sort of talking point as the game was coming to a close, Brian Graham did get through Blair, but then that Paul Hallen challenge coming towards the end of the game. Just talk us through that and just how the reaction to that and how well it was received.
Yeah, I think Brian Graham getting through is maybe a bit generous. I think being played through by Lewis Stevenson is probably more accurate. But just class for Paul Hanlon to get that tackle in on a booking as well. Like, do you know what I mean? That's got to be going through his head. He's got to time it right. He's got to get that tackle in well, and he absolutely did. And again, it just, I don't know, it kind of spoke to the performance yesterday. Like, it wasn't always pretty and it wasn't always perfect, but like, again, every manager says it. Oh, you know, I mean, Mick Pake will be out saying it, I'm sure. Oh, you can't question the boys' attitude. You can't question their effort. But I feel like now you really can't actually. Like, they are digging in for each other. They're working hard. A really well-timed tackle. And just lovely to see Brian Graham greeting about something else.
As always. I mean, he doesn't stop, does he? He's just relentless.
No, he really doesn't.
I suppose that comes with the goals that he scores. So
exactly.
He'll take that. So yeah, the game ends. We get our first point on the road. Neill Collins, a lot of the chat, Scott, was about sort of the character and determination of the players, deserving sort of. Do you think he deserves quite a lot of praise for the big calls that he made during the game, and just how much it was changed up, and as well the squad deserving credit for sort of showing a bit of resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Collins, we were all pretty much in agreement that at half-time, I think he made the right call in terms of changing the formation, taking off Fordyce, who was having probably the poorest game out of everybody. And yeah, I do get at the time that Hanlon could have been an option to come off because of the booking, but I do think that the right one was made, and that even the two changes that he made on the hour mark, I think everybody kind of really, it came as a wee bit of surprise to see Hamilton coming off, not necessarily because I don't think he had his best game yesterday, but it was more the fact that, like, I think if that was like a McGlynn or maybe even an Ian Murray, he probably would keep his striker on and just look to add another attacker onto that just to give us some sort of chance. But I thought it was also brave to take off Byrne, because Byrne's that sort of player that he helps, especially if you're trying to get back into the game. He's still got to be there sitting in case of a break on you to help your defence out. So I thought it was brave to take the two of them off and put on, especially like a young lad like Gibson that's still adapting to the Championship, but I think he's shown, like, game on game, that I think he probably is already ready for the Championship. Like, everybody was kind of like, well, he might take this season to sort of develop a bit more. He might use this season. Like, I almost thought he might get 6 months with us, and then if he's not getting a lot of game time, he might go out on loan. But I actually think I wouldn't even stick him out on loan. I think he's a very good impact sub to have. And, I mean, I think there'll be games where he's useful for the start as well. So, I think the right subs are made, and I think I was quite open at the time that it was nothing against Neill Collins when he came in. I just didn't agree with the sacking at the time. But I do think that I do think that I think Neill Collins has grown on quite a few people over the last few weeks, especially. It's always easy when you're getting positive results, but I think the way we've been winning games in terms of it's actually stuff that he's doing in game, and we can see it physically, the changes that are being made, and that's what's the sort of the thing that's cheering me up watching the games, is going, well, I'm actually seeing improvements in game. It's not like, oh, that didn't go well last week, so we'll have to sort it in training, and then we'll sort it now, whether it's at half time, 30 minutes, whatever, he'll do it now. and it's for the benefit of the team every time. So that's the thing that's kind of impressed me. And so, yeah, I think he's also quite a likeable guy from what I've been told. I've never met him yet, but I think he just seems a sort of nice guy, and the way he comes across in his interviews as well. So, yeah, I hope he continues to keep doing as he's going along now, to be honest.
Blair, what are your thoughts just on that point?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm day by day falling in love with Neill Collins. I'm so impressed with. I mean, he does the manager bit, right? But that's kind of what you expect of any manager. That's his job. But I do like the changes that he's making. I like the fact that he'll come out and he'll talk about what he's doing and why he's doing it and stuff. And there's a clear thought process behind it. I really like the way he talks in interviews about the club and the fans, and we've mentioned it before, and it seems like nothing, but I think it's massive. That our club thing at the end of that interview speaks volumes for me for what his kind of mantra is about. And I think Dylan Easton's a perfect example of it, because he's clearly enjoying working with him and he's clearly learning something from him. And I think there was nobody watching the Rovers this season when Murray was sacked that didn't have the thought of, I wonder how Easton will react. Because Easton was very much Murray's boy. Like, the two of them were close. He brought him in from Airdrie. He thought a lot of him. I've heard him joking before. I can't remember if it was in person or in an interview, but he joked about how he has breakfast. He used to have breakfast with the manager.
Yeah.
Like, he used to sit with the manager at his table having breakfast and stuff. Like, they were clearly close. And he's loving the change. He's talking about how much he's learning, how much he's gaining, how much he's growing. So, yeah, long may it continue. And I think Scott's right. It is easy when you're getting good results. But Collins has not always been getting good results.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't forget the fact that that was our first point away from home.
Yeah.
We lost at Livingston, and he came out with a lot of credit from it. Do you know what I mean? Like, the fans can see something in there that it's a positive trajectory. I'm not with a lot of fans in the sense that I'm not writing off this season yet. I think there's a long way to go yet. But if we end up writing off this season and this is building for next season, it feels really positive.
I would agree with that. I think that I'm not writing off the season myself. I think that it's just the focus has just got to be getting on pulling in the teams that are sort of 4th and 5th place at the moment. And again, yesterday was a point, but it's better than the results that we've had away from home before this season, which again, it's just some of those we really should be. I've been looking at wins as opposed to losses, but it's interesting that the sort of, you think back to before the Airdrie game, and then people were starting to really start to openly question it. Whereas now the narrative's completely changed. But that's the nature of football, and everyone's entitled to their opinions, and people can be very fickle. The amount of people that are not talking about cladding anymore is quite spectacular. if I do say so myself, the complaints about laundry rooms and cladding have gone down about 100%. But again,
you've got to remember as well, he's not had a transfer window. Like, he's brought in Dabo, and he's brought in Pollock,
and David.
And he's brought in who else has he brought in?
Corey
David.
Aye.
And you're like, I mean, yeah, Corey David, the jury's still out on, but like, he's made an impact already, and that's with basically 2 hands tied behind his back.
So that would be my sort of takeaway point as well from it, is that come January, he then gets access to every single one of the English teams in terms of potential loan signings, and being able to say, like, look, I've worked down south before, or he'll have contacts with his clubs. Yeah. You've also got the sort of the American side of it as well. As to whether he goes down that route is a bit more difficult to say. But yeah, I mean, all 3 of his signings so far are sort of short-term signing deals, so there might be substantial change come January, but we're heading in the right direction, you've got to say, in terms of, I think based off what the message was when we got rid of Ian Murray, was like the team weren't creating chances. I feel like now we are in a position where we're going to places like Firhill, we are creating chances, we saw it against Ayr, and now that we're getting players back, I feel like we're looking a lot more solid. But then again, we've said this sort of thing before, and it's came right back to hit me in the face as well, in particular before, so you've just got to be a bit conscious. Leslie, just to come back to you just quickly, one person that we've not mentioned a lot of today is actually surprisingly the referee. Just your thoughts on the referee's performance yesterday after we've gone through quite a spell of where the referee's been highly involved, high talking points. Do you think yesterday was a bit of a change in that? Are you willing to dish out any sort of praise for that? Or do you think it was just the sort of nature of the game yesterday?
I think in January we should be offering this referee a deal, because we need somebody else who can sit deep alongside Sean Byrne. This referee's ability to break up play, control the ball with his feet and stop attacks is incredible. 5-6 times he was caught with no idea where the ball was and ended up coming into contact with the ball. And usually, it was in our favour. So I was very, very impressed with the referee's deep-lying midfield play, I have to say. No, I mean, there's always going to be things that a referee is going to do in a game where you think, oh, hang on, why is it going that way? Why is it going that way? Nothing stands out for me as being horrendous that he got wrong. I mean, there's a few points where everybody's up, but everybody gets up on their feet and calls for it in the heat of the moment. Nothing stands out for me as being absolutely disastrous. Maybe that's because we weren't denied a clear opportunity, but it has been one of the less notable refereeing performances, I think, shall we say, compared to some of the ones we've had in the last few weeks.
He was definitely consistent.
Yeah,
I was going to say he was consistent throughout the whole game. I mean, consistently not fantastic, but consistent for me is important. I thought he was giving away some of the really cheap fouls, the cheap free kicks that weren't. Like, it was just breaking up play too much. But he was doing it both ways. Like, he was giving the nudges in the back and he was giving the silly pushes, but he was giving it to both teams. So you kind of knew from 20 minutes in, you knew what the referee was going to let you away with and what he wasn't going to let you away with. So no real complaints at all, actually, on the referee for once.
He's also regarded as one of the sort of, if you want to have a category, like the top sort of 5 referees in the country. He's doing European games and he's involved in sort of high level games. So I think the fact, I was actually a little bit surprised that we had him, to be honest, yesterday. But I think that was probably because there was only 3 top flight games, or was it 4 yesterday? So there wasn't a full card on, so it probably allowed 1 or 2 of them to drop down and do a championship game yesterday, which I think makes a massive difference because, like, I do think I don't think it's been mentioned a whole lot, but when it is, like, I do think VAR has had a massive play in pushing guys to, like, probably League 2 or League 1 max into lower end Premiership and high end Championship games where they probably needed another 2 seasons at League 2 and League 1 to kind of develop and make mistakes. Not that I'm saying like teams like Bonnyrigg and that didn't deserve a good referee, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of the referee's own development, they need like their own time as well as players do at young ages and stuff like that. So I think there is times where I'm a little bit more lenient, but when it's such blatant stuff that they miss, then that's when you do get kind of on your high horse and go after them. But it's I'm just glad that yesterday it wasn't anything really in the game that was decided by the ref. So again, I hope that continues on because we've seen a fair few this season.
I'm just thinking that's a really low bar that we've set. Like, you've not made any horrific decisions, so we're quite happy with that. Like,
you don't want to notice the referee. That's when you know he's had a good game. You don't notice the referee.
100%.
I'll say it again, but they make 200, 300 decisions in a 90-minute period. Of course, they're going to get some wrong. They're human beings.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Lewis Stevenson gave the ball straight to Brian Graham 30 yards from our goal yesterday, and he's played 400 games in the top flight. Like, mistakes happen. Do you know what I mean? Everybody makes mistakes, and referees are absolutely no different. I just wish that they would make more mistakes in our favour. That's all I ask.
I don't think that's a tough one to ask. Just Scott, just to come back to you, just briefly, final question. Just, do you think the ability to be able to sort of adapt is going to define our season, being able to change things up? Because that was really probably the story of yesterday, just being able to switch things up and utilise it. So yeah, just how important do you think that will be going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on it a few times sort of in the last half an hour. It's just like how much it's been noticeable that we've changed in game and how much better we've looked when these changes are. Because you can make changes and it just, again, it still doesn't work. But it just seems to be that the players clearly are working on something in training where they're probably doing a formation for 10, 15 minutes in a game or whatever. Then he's probably like blowing his whistle, shouting at them, going, right, different formation, so that they can sort of practice in terms of in a game. If he's like, how many times where a manager, like players are ignoring a manager shouting at them at the side because they're like, well, I'm focusing on the game right now. But like at the end of the day, like I think Fordyce as well yesterday's probably wanting to just ignore whatever abuse he's getting from his manager. But stuff like that, I think it's only going to be beneficial if we can just adapt so quickly in game to stuff like that. But I hope, and you never want to be sort of tarred with a brush at, or they can only play 4-2-3-1 or they can only play 3-5-2, because it means then, well, teams will set up for you far too easily if that's the case. Like, I mean, there was a while, I think it was maybe last season, like Morton were playing a strict 4-4-2 every week, Muirhead and Oakley up front. And folk had kind of worked it out, but then Imrie ended up changing it and they went on that sort of decent little run last season until folk actually realised that they had changed their sort of play and then they went back to being guff again. But I think it's just stuff like that where if you can keep managers second guessing, that's where you're going to get your sort of margins, errors in games where you could just nick a one goal win out of nothing, really.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point to consider in the context of yesterday as well, because of Partick and the way that they play. To be able to change it up, I don't think a lot of teams would be able to do that in the way that we did it yesterday, to be able to switch like a full formation and bring in like 3 second players that can have such a big impact on the game. Right, for man of the match, just start off with yourself, Blair. Who are you giving it to?
A few contenders, to be fair. I thought Lewis Jameson deserves a bit of a mention. Liam Dick probably deserves a bit of a mention, and not just for the goal, but for his all-round game. For me, it was Dylan Easton. He was a level above yesterday, I thought.
Yep. Scott, how about for you?
I've got to back my namesake. I thought, yeah, Scott Brown again, absolutely superb. I think I talk about it most weeks and just how good it is to see him back in the team, and he just is a driving force in that midfield, and he must be, like, for Sean Byrne especially, he must be a joy to play beside, because he just does just as much as Stanton does everybody's running for them, and he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he is a true captain. So that's why I'm so glad to have him back. And I just thought yesterday, especially in that second half, he just was the epitome of what I want in my midfield, really. So I think yesterday I thought Easton and Dicko and that all played well as well, but I think Bruni was just that little bit above yesterday.
And Leslie, for you?
I cannot disagree with any of that. I would probably fall down on the side of Easton. Again, not just for his free kick, but also for his contribution. I think particularly end of the second half, he was blowing out his arse, but he was still trying to make things happen. And he could have had a second goal if Cody David hadn't decided to pick a fight with Lee Ashcroft 30 yards from goal. So I think Easton probably had a terrific game. Brown as well, absolutely an honourable mention. Easton for me, man of the match.
Yeah, I think you have all covered it very nicely there. I think those two. And as well, honourable mentions I would give to Finlay Pollock and Gibson as well for coming on and changing the impact of the game. So yeah.
I was going to say, just before we move on, just note as well, we've gone through what we now, an hour and 13 minutes or so. We haven't mentioned Kevin Dabrowski.
I know.
Again. And to be fair, it's because he did everything right yesterday for me. Another really solid game from him, another really solid 90 minutes. Commanding coming out the box. The second punch, when there was the two, probably not the best, but then to pick the ball out there straight after it. And actually, Fordyce absolutely sold him up the river in the first half with a back pass, and he dealt with it really, really well. So again, if we're going to slag him off when he's crap, let's celebrate him when he's not.
100%.
He didn't actually have, when I think about it, he didn't have a lot of like actual saves to make in the game. Like when Partick had a shot, it was kind of just over the bar or whatever. So like he dealt with what he had to do, but just looking back at the highlights again, he didn't really have a lot of saves to make in the game.
No.
Well, yeah, fair play to Big Kev, answering his critics continually, which is good to see. Even if he's
Barnett's still on
not
point.
got much to do, he still deserves the praise for it, I'd say. So yeah, we will of course be back next week with a look ahead for the visit of Greenock Morton, our great friends that we have along there, and Dougie Emery, my personal favourite person. Yeah, aside from that, one final point is that a week today, Greatham Meldrum is going to be at the Fife programme and memorabilia fair, which is hosted in Hill of Beath. You'll have a sort of stall there, I believe. There's going to be sort of different people, all sort of selling various memorabilia involving the Fife clubs. So that's a week today, Sunday the 17th, from 10:30 through to 2 o'clock. So feel free to drop in there. I think it's the ex-servicesman's club that's at Hill of Beath, just next to the Slim Jim's statue that they've got, the Jim Baxter statue. So yeah, until then, and next Thursday when we've got our preview, thanks for taking the time to listen, and bye for now.
Bye, Bob.